I'm procrastinating, so you are gonna get a color theory lesson. Okay, so a question that apparently comes up a lot for some people is how to understand color theory, so maybe I can help. I'll just post all of these little things in my story, so if you feel like watching, keep watching the rest of my stories, and if you don't watch my story anymore. Okay, so how to understand color theory. Basically, I just wanted to define what color theory is. And let's just simplify it down to the basics. We're gonna try to make it as simple as possible. So, color theory basically is pigmentation of hair due to two types of melanin. Eumelanin, which is responsible for blacks and browns in the hair, and pheomelanin, which is responsible for reds and yellows in the hair. So unfortunately, I don't have one of these without the numbers on it, and if we just ignored the numbers and all the words around it, pretended it wasn't there, like let's just look at the color wheel, this is going to be the most probably important thing that you can use, especially when you start doing hair, to help you understand color theory a little bit better. It's a great tool. It's probably one of the best tools that you can use. And so what we can do is we can break it down and talk about how it relates to color and why you need it. We're also just going to look at this and ignoring everything else. We're just looking at these colors on the bottom, not these. Don't look at this. We're looking at this. These are the natural hair color levels. What levels mean is that hair goes by levels, and the numbers besides them, the two, represent the level that's here. And it goes from darkest, which is black, to lightest, which is lightest blonde. So they go from 2 to level 10. So these are the way that the hair is naturally when we're born, without any color in it, anything like that. Usually you see most people with levels between 4 to 7. Those are the most common colors. You don't really see a lot of 2s, 3s, 8s, 9s, or 10s in natural hair. So now actually going to these, they're called exposed contributing pigment. Sorry for the glare. But these are, at each of these levels, the underlying pigment. So whenever we put lightener or color, or we try to change the color in the hair at all, these are what we're going to get from the hair. Like this is what's going to show. So we call it lifting whenever we lighten or bleach. I want you to not use the word bleach anymore. Use the word lighten. So when we lighten, these are what you get. These are the exposed contributing pigment or the underlying pigment. And it's not, so whenever we use lightener, a lot of times on the packaging it says lifts up to 7 levels or up to 9 levels. When you use lightener, I want you to think of this as a lightning curve, and it says it right here. We don't refer to lightning as lifting through levels. You're not really you don't lift and you get okay, now we've lifted 1 level, now 2 levels, now 3 levels, 4, 5, 6, it doesn't really, lightener doesn't work that way. Lightener, it just lifts. And the way that it lifts is more dependent on the developer that you mix it with. And sometimes if you lift with color, you don't really see the lightning curve as much. So that's why I kind of want you to ignore the up to 7 levels, up to 9 levels that it has on the packaging, because it doesn't really make sense. Let's actually take a step back from all that, and let's talk about the different kinds of colors and things you can use to change the color of the natural hair. So, we have lightener, we have permanent color, semi-permanent, demi-permanent, and temporary. So I want lightener to be all by itself because it's not really color. And there are way different rules from color than lightener. So we're going to have that in its own little category here off to the side. Let's start with permanent, which is probably the most common and what you're going to use the most. And you can kind of do everything with it. You can go darker, you can go lighter, you can change the tone, all of that fun stuff, right? It mixes with developer and it makes a permanent change to the color of the hair. That's why we call it permanent color. So semi-permanent, demi-permanent, permanent, they all talk about the permanence of the color. Anyway, sorry, they all refer to the permanence of the color. So permanent is permanent. It makes a change to the color of the hair. The only way to get it out is to cut it off or like lighten it out with lightener. Semi-permanent is what you would call direct dyes or maybe like fashion shades. So it's a semi-permanence. It doesn't mix with developer, which is why it's called a direct dye. It comes out of the tube, the color that it's going to be, and we put it on the hair. And I personally like to think of it as a stain. And if that's helpful for you, cool, use it. If not, I get it. You don't have to. Take what works, leave what doesn't. But it's a semi-permanent color. So the permanence of it is semi-permanent, but I do like to think of it as a dye or stain because it stains the hair. Then you have demi-permanent. Demi-permanent mixes with developer. It's usually what you call a glaze, a toner, a gloss. Those are all three interchangeable terms, at least for me. It's the same product. You can do a lot more with this than people tell you that you can. You know, we say it's for gray blending. It doesn't fully cover gray. It does. It'll fully cover gray if you know how to mix it. If you know what you're putting it on. There are some universal like laws and rules of hair color, right? But it's just a way for you to understand it better. It doesn't mean that it actually works that way just because we say that it does. So like we say, oh, demi-permanent won't fully cover gray hair. Just because we say that doesn't make it true. Yes, it will. So I want you to take that and just know that moving forward, yes, you can. You just have to know what fabric you're putting it on, right? So anyways, demi-permanent, again, it's a demi-permanent hair color. So it lasts a little bit longer in the hair because it mixes with developer, but it's ammonia-free. So you're not really getting the cuticle open all the way, but it does deposit into the hair more than like a semi-permanent, which is what we call a direct dye or stain. Although if you put a direct dye after you have lightened the hair, you have that cuticle open, so you kind of get a little bit more deposit of it in there because it goes into the cuticle right after lightening, but that's another topic. Anyways, demi-permanent color or any kind of donors, basically. Back to demi, what I forgot to say is that it's not going to lift the color. You can't lift with demi-permanent with toners, glosses, glazes, whatever. You can't lighten hair with them. You can only go darker. So that wouldn't be something that you would go for if you were trying to make someone's hair lighter. Okay, this has all been a lot of information, so take a little deep breath. If you want to, you can hold down the video and that should pause it for you, and you can like write down what I'm saying, take your little notes, whatever you need to do. Just check in with yourself. Is this too much? Have you already got enough? Like, do you feel like this is already overwhelming? Do you have any questions? Like, if you've watched up to this point and you had questions about something, if something I said was confusing to you, if you feel like you're getting lost because this is a lot of information already, DM me and I can help clarify anything. let's talk about some more of the things that affect color theory. So, I actually have a little list here that is for formulating practice in the back of this book, which is also, like, these pages in the back of your color books are going to be really good and really helpful, especially if you're really new to color theory, or if you've been doing color for a really long time and, you know, sometimes it's just good to go back to the basics. There's a lot of really good information in the back of your color book. So, anyways, these are the things that affect your color. So the things to consider when, like, talking about color theory is your natural level. What are you starting with? Because 50% of your end result is already in the hair. Like your toner, if you're using a color to change, you know, you're lifting with color, you're lifting with lightener. 50% of your finished product, when you get at the bottom, when you're done, you're styling their hair, they're ready to go, 50% of that is already in their hair. So, like when you're mixing your toner, you need to consider 50% of the toner is already what's in the hair. The next thing is percentage of gray and white. Their texture, is it fine, average, or coarse? Their porosity. Porosity means how you know, how much water does it hold? How much is it going to soak up the color? Or, you know, is it resistant? Is it normal? Or is it really porous? Resistant, maybe whenever you wash your hair, or like you shampoo your hair, you get it wet and the water kind of like bounces off of it. Well, then that would also tell us their texture is kind of coarse and their porosity is really resistant. Is it normal? You don't really have trouble. Porous, it just means more like, it more refers to color that their hair is really absorbent, I guess. This would be like overprocessed, or it would just be something that you would formulate differently for. If you were to take literally one strand of their hair and put it into a glass of water, it would sink to the bottom. Previous color application, do they have color on their hair at all right now? If they do, what is it? What was done? That's something you really have to consider. Their target shade means, what do they want? What's their end result? Where do they want to get to? How do they want to end up? Choice of developer strength means, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. An application type. How are you going to apply the color to get their result? I thought it was recording and it wasn't recording. Anyways, let's just look at the numbers. These refer to the developers. 3, 6, 9, and 12. So 3 is 10 volume, 6 is 20 volume, 9 is 30 volume, and 12 is 40 volume. This is referring to how it's mixed with color. And these are the basic guidelines that you're going to get whenever you start learning about developer mixed with color. So it's going to tell you what you can do with each developer. So, like, whenever you mix this with color, it's like the lowest volume developer in the permanent color lines. Then the next, and then the next, and then the next, right? And so it tells you what you can do at each level. 1 level lighter, 2 level lighter, 3 levels lighter. So that is going to affect your over. So whenever it says choice of developer strength, that's what it means. And there's also 6 volume and 13 volume, and some lines have 0 volume, and that gets more into like brand specific, which I want to kind of try to avoid. And this is just like overall color theory. It works for every kind of color. It doesn't matter what line you use. All these rules are the same for any color line. That's what I'm trying to teach to you, not brand specific. Although I do use Wella at work, I love it. It's a great brand. But what I'm teaching to you is universal. You can use it no matter what brand you go to. I just sort of realized that I got into this big like lesson and a big old tangent about color theory and all this crap when I really want to make it just like a basic understanding. And I told you I was going to tell you about the color wheel, and then I didn't even tell you about the color wheel. So let's go back to the color wheel. Okay, this is the only color wheel that I could find right now. Sorry that it's got all these numbers in the middle, but let's just focus on the outside and kind of ignore the numbers in the middle. So first, let's talk about all the warm colors, which are yellow, orange, and red. And then let's talk about all the cool colors, which are purple, blue, and green. So if we split this down the middle, you can see how it has all the warm colors on one side and all the cool colors on the other side. And then it's made up of primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. The tertiary is in the middle, and for now, for this like basic understanding, we're going to ignore tertiary and just focus on primary and secondary, which is the outside. Anyway, so you really want to look at complementary colors, which is like one of the biggest reasons that we refer to the color wheel. Complementary colors means what's exactly across from that color on the color wheel, because that's what you're going to use to cancel out unwanted tones. So let's say you lighten and you get like an orange. Well, then the complementary color's blue, red and green, orange and blue, yellow and violet. We don't call it purple, we call it violet. One thing that I will say about that is you're not really going to see orange a lot of the time. I really don't feel like you get orange whenever you lift natural hair. You're mostly going to get orange and really need blue only whenever you're lifting like through color on someone's hair, like they've colored their hair already, like maybe they put black on it or something like that, and now you're trying to lift through it with lightener. You'll get orange, which is very much like artificial color. You're not going to see orange in the hair. You get more from like a red to a golden, because hair is made up of like golden tones. You don't really have orange in the hair naturally. It's artificial. It comes from artificial. And let's talk about this also. Obviously, the secondary colors, the primary are red, yellow, and blue, right? So the secondary is what's between them, and they're made up from the primaries, which are orange, green, and violet. So let's talk about, there's only one true cool color on the whole color wheel, and that's blue, right? Because violet is made from red and blue. Red's a warm color. Orange is made from yellow and red, and those are both warm colors. And green is made from yellow and blue, and yellow's a warm color. So violet and green have warm colors in them. The only true cool color is blue. So whenever you say you want a cool tone, a cool color, you want a silver, things like that, you really want to go with like the blues. But you also have to know when to use it. Okay, so you don't really get the color inside the tube that you're going to have on the hair. It's colorless in the tube. And the reason for that is because it needs two things to work. So we have to mix it with developer, which is the activator, because we need it to get that extra oxygen atom to make it work how it's supposed to work. So we mix it with that, with the ammonia inside of it, which opens up that hair cuticle and couples with the pigment inside the hair to change the color of the hair, because it has couplers in the tube. It's a chemical reaction whenever mixed with lightener, which allows it to get the oxygen, and it mixes with the pigment inside your hair, the pigment molecules in your hair, and the pigment molecules in the tube of color. And it takes that dye molecule inside the tube, pairs it with the pigment molecule in your hair, and turns it into the color that you wanted your hair to be. That's the chemical reaction. That's a really oversimplified way of telling you how it changes the color of your hair. And I'm referring to permanent color when I talk about this. So permanent color, it makes that permanent change. Your hair stays that way. Yes, it fades, but it doesn't change back. So it makes that permanent change, and that's how it works. The reason that you really want to get good with this thing right here, this little fancy tool, is because you really need to know what's the underlying pigment that you're starting with, and the color that you're mixing it with, and what your desired results are going to be. Because I'm going to give you an example. Let's say we start with a level 7. Let's say we're going to start with a level 6 and we want to get to a level 7. So we just need one level of lift. What's important for us to know, and why we really need to understand our color theory, is because we need to know that this is the underlying pigment. So this is contributing to whatever I mix to put on the hair, whatever color I take from my color room that I mix with developer to lift the color from a level 6 to a level 7. I need to take this into account. This is what I'm starting with. This is the underlying pigment that's there already, and it is going to contribute to this color. So you don't just take like a level 7, 0, which would be like a natural level 7, and mix it with 20 volume developer, which is what you would need to get one level of lift, and get this. So let me explain that. We want to start here and get here, right? So what we need is we need to know that this is what's underneath this this is what we see on the client's hair. This is what the client wants to see when they leave. We don't want these to be reflecting. We need to know from seeing this that this is what's underneath. This is whenever we put any kind of color, lightener color, when we want to make a change to this and we want to go lighter and we use something to make that happen, we need to know that this is what we are starting with. Even though we see this is what's underneath. So that's whenever we go back to this fancy little thing, the color wheel. And we want to find this color here, wherever it is, right? So this might also be a really good thing to refer to if we're just, like, we need to take this, and we have to think about these two things whenever we go to mix the color that we want and make our choice of developer strength, right? So we need to go from 1 to 6. We need to think about those two things at the same time. What's our target shade? What are we starting with? This is what we want to get to, and this is what we have now. So we need to think about all of that when trying to formulate here. And it's what we use to determine what's going to be our underlying pigment. Actually, what's going to be our tone that we need to use to lift one level and kind of tone out that under. Sorry, I don't know how much of that last video got cut off, so I was saying how much or what tone we need to use to kind of neutralize our underlying pigment. Neutralize would be like to cancel out, right? So if we're trying to start here and get here, what over here out of these colors is going to neutralize that pigment for us when we lift, when we expose it, to still see this color whenever we're done, and not this, and definitely not this. And what I will say is that's kind of tricky because you're going to expose this, and this is probably one of the hardest levels to lift past because of the tone of it, of the exposed contributing pigment. So normally, if somebody wants to go any lighter than like 2 levels, you want to grab the lightener. Okay, so if we want to go 1 level from 6 to 7, and we know we have this that we want to cancel out or neutralize whenever we expose that contributing pigment, we're going to refer here, we're going to find what's across from it, and that's what we're going to use whenever we lift. What I would say is I might go more with like a 2 which this is getting Wella specific, but if it was a stroke 2, then it would be green. So the way it would be written in Wella would be a number 7, which would refer to the natural level 7, and then the stroke 2, which is green. So we'd have this to lighten here. And the other thing is that if you're going to lighten more than 2 levels, you're going to grab the lightener, because nothing here, no color that you grab is going to have enough pigment to neutralize anything coming from below here, especially like reds and oranges. It's just not. So you would still see that, and that's not something that we want. So anything 2 levels or lighter, we're going to grab the lightener, because that can get us, in one day, you can go all the way from here to here, which you cannot do with color. If you're trying to go more than 2 levels on normal to thick hair, I would grab lightener. And even on fine hair, I would just go with lightener to be safer. You're not going to find a color in your color line that's going to be able to completely neutralize these while lifting at the same time. Because the other thing you want to think about is how much ammonia is in the tube. And I'd say level 6 and darker is less ammonia, and level 7 and higher is more ammonia. And that refers to how much deposit or lift you're going to get, and you need more lift in levels 7 through 9. You don't really need a lot of lift in levels 6 and darker, so 2 through 6, you need more deposit. So you're going to get more deposit in these levels, and you're going to get more lift in levels 7 through 10, deposit 6 through 2. See, less ammonia 2 through 6, and more ammonia 7 through 10. And also lifting with color, you're not really ever going to get like a pale or lightest blonde, pale yellow or lightest blonde, which pale yellow is what we would refer to when we're talking about the exposed contributing pigment at a level 10, which is the lightest that you could get the hair. You're not really going to get that with color. You're going to have to use lightener. Okay, so I feel like this was a lot of information. We've talked about a lot. This is just kind of like a breakdown of what I would maybe tell a beginner or somebody who just wanted to kind of get back to basics. There's obviously so much more, and this was just like a little overview. It doesn't really get into it too much. So what I want to stop here, and if anybody has any questions about anything, if something confused you, if you want me to expand on something more, like DM me, let me know. I'm happy to help. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to get back to what I was doing before I chose to procrastinate and put it off. Let me finish it. And yeah, I'll post some more later.